Okay, hello everybody. I am David Liebman, the Artistic Director and founder of the International Association of Schools of Jazz.
Wouter, Turkenburg, the Executive Director of the IASJ.
And I'm Mike Tracy, Director of the Jazz Studies Program at the University of Louisville.
And this is June 30th, 2006, and we are on the last day of our 16th, what we call jazz meeting, our IASJ jazz meeting. And that means that for the last 5-6 days we have been having concerts and master classes and lectures with students from over 20 countries and teachers and administrators gathered together in this year in Louisville. And what we'd like to do in this little round table is just give you a couple of the highlights of our organization, what we do. Wouter, I think we'll reference the place of the IASJ in the world scene, and Mike can talk about our meeting as we had it this week since he directed the activities. The organization began in the mid-'80s when I started writing letters to different administrators and teachers and faculty members of schools where I had been doing workshops. It became quite common in the 1980s for visiting American musicians to give anything from 1 day to even 5 or 6 day workshops in various places in Europe especially. Jazz education, though not new to Europe, was becoming quite more popular and more common in the 80s. And I found myself one day in Denmark teaching and another day performing and playing in Paris and so forth over those 10 years in the 80s. And it was apparent to me, it's pretty obvious, that musicians, these schools were all doing the same thing, which is teaching this art form. And as in any art form, or pretty much in any subject, there are things that are learned no matter the language that are common. I always say that in jazz, you can go to almost every country where there is jazz and say a tune like All Blues by Miles Davis or Take the A Train by Duke Ellington, and there'll be immediate recognition and immediate communication between musicians. So with that in mind, I thought it might be really incumbent and necessary for us to do something that has existed in other fields for a while, but to form an association where the schools and the students particularly would be able to be exposed to each other, interact, could lead to various exchange programs and so forth. Hopefully the whole world at some point when jazz grows to other countries, as it is exponentially really, and to have a network where we could exchange ideas and plans and programs and of course lead to more performing opportunities, which of course is the main point for jazz, to get the chance for students and faculty members to be able to play their instruments in public. And so finally in 1989, I had a very nice response from so many schools and called a meeting in a particular city in Germany where I had some relations with a music publisher, and sure enough we had 15 countries showing up, 12 schools, 12 countries, 15 schools, I forget which, and it was just fantastic to sit at that table with a representative from Israel and from the New School in New York City and Paris, and Wouter, who came from The Hague, the Royal Conservatory. And at the meeting I just laid out my vision more than anything and said, well, if we're going to do this, I guess the most important thing we have to do is find a place to have a first meeting where you and anybody else who hears about it will send students to interact for a week. And Wouter agreed to take on that responsibility. He visited me in the United States. We put our plans together. We kind of drew, jokingly, but I guess we would have observed it, a line that would be the minimum amount of schools necessary for us to go through the bother of doing this at 5 schools or 5 countries, I forget. And lo and behold, we ended up with what in the first year? 15. So it was quite successful and a lot of enthusiasm, because and the bottom line is that students are coming together from countries and seeing people from different areas, and they have so much in common through the music. My motto is to promote positive and beneficial cross-cultural communication between different peoples, using jazz as the vehicle to do this. And again, as we sit here on Friday, June 30th, we are at the end of our 16th year. Been to Dublin, Ireland, and Siena, Italy, and Graz, Austria, on a boat in the Baltic Sea where we went to a different country each day. And where else? Santiago de Compostela in Helsinki. Of course, Berklee School of Music in Boston, the New School in New York City, Ramon School, Tel Aviv, and so forth. And we're now planning on Siena for our 3rd time, and Latvia, Riga, Latvia for the year after, and so on. So just in summary, it's been a great ride. It's been very successful. I count that on the average we have about 100 participants per meeting. So we've had maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people who have walked through the doors of the IASJ, and through that have met people from other countries, and especially for the youngsters. I mean, their average age is somewhere in the mid-20s. For them to come out of their country, to see people playing at a high level, because we do ask for and get a pretty high level of musicianship, for them to be exposed to each other and to get out of their immediate locale and to see that this is something happening all over the place can be really a life-changing event for some of them. And I'm very gratified with all the cooperation that I have received and we have received over the years from the schools and the various hosts like Mike did this week. So with that in mind, I want to ask Wouter, who is the head of the Jazz Studies program at the Royal Conservatory in Den Haag in the Netherlands, and is the, as you said, executive director, and that school is our home base. We are non-profit organizations with the laws of the Netherlands, and our official office work and, you know, meeting stuff and budgets and all that, of course, are all done there, with a lot of help and cooperation from the Royal Conservatory, I might add. But Wouter, because he's in Europe and he's an enterprising young man, middle young man, he has taken part in quite a bit of international organizations that have to do with music, and I'd like him to maybe talk a little bit about what's going on and how IASJ fits into that picture.
Yeah. IASJ, you can see it from many angles. Within, then, it's an organization that is involved in organizing mainly the main activities, organizing these meetings. Of course, we have a website and a newsletter, and we bring out reports that we disseminate to everybody interested in music and in jazz. But over the last 5 to 10 years, I see there's a genuine interest also from all kinds of other organizations. And by now, the IASJ has become a very established organization, and with all the good sides and bad sides about this, has become part of the music establishment. Now, it's quite new for myself, but also for my colleagues, for my school, and heads of departments all over the world, to interact with those organizations, such as the UNESCO. The UNESCO has a music council, the International Music Council, and the International Music Council has divided up the world in 5 regions, and one of the regions is Europe, and I'm also chairman of the European Music Council. And within the largest and most active regional council of the International Music Council. Now, in the European Music Council, the IASJ, and also in the International Music Council, the IASJ is seen as the voice not only for jazz education but for jazz. And I see an enormous open-mindedness now, and all the prejudices that were there before, that funky guys and didn't know how to play the instrument, don't play this piano, you know, not for jazz. You know, all that is gone. Even more so, there's a growing awareness that jazz education and an organization like the IASJ has something to offer. And I think the main key is improvisation. We are experts in improvisation. And with improvisation, it's not only playing scales of chords, but it's more. It's also, with improvisation comes the interaction in a group. It's a completely different relation within a jazz group than in a classical symphony with a guy with a little piece of wood in front. Or is it ivory? What is it? Well, depends on his budget. So there's something we have there, and we have to offer. And just to use an American expression, I think the IASJ and jazz schools now have their act together, and they have something to offer. And we are moving forward slowly to see how we can package this, how we can serve this to the music world at large. And I see that the music world at large is very interested in what the IASJ is doing and what we have developed there. Just to give you a small example, in the European Music Council there's a choir organization, Europa Canta, means Europe Sings. Now if you go down to the membership there, you don't see the 80 or 100 members that we have as the IASJ, but you see 3, maybe 5 million people that are involved in singing in choirs, organized in choir singing in Europe, all over, in every city. And they have also meetings like we have at IASJ, a bigger scale, and they also have a request list, and high on every request list, wherever you come, East, West, North, South Europe, is improvise. How can we improvise? They don't want to become jazz improvisations. They don't want to sing in close harmony, but this ability to improvise. Now I think it's a challenge for the IASJ to keep on having these meetings. It looks like it's a snowball going down the mountain. We even have more requests to organize than there are years in the calendar. And it's also thanks to a successful meeting like the one we're having here to organize this, because there's a hunger for what we're doing, and it's our task and responsibility to say what it is, to formalize what it is, to verbalize what it is, and bring what we have in jazz and jazz education to the music world at large. And that, I think, is a big challenge, but also a big opportunity for the IASJ to stand forward in the next decades. Probably it will take to do that in the musical world at large. And I think with the team we're having, we should be the ones to
So
do
we're
that.
now on a missionary work.
We are.
After we took care of our own house, we're looking at our neighbors' houses. And
That's it.
that is the way of the world, and that's very good. And I agree with you, and I think that improvisation, there's more and more curiosity about it. And just because I know, I always tell the story, but it's the naivety of it, but the realness of it. My father, when he would come and see me play in my beginning years, of course, beginning in high school, he would just say, how do you guys do it? You don't look at music, your eyes are closed, you don't talk to each other, and there's no one leading you. How do you do it?
Yeah.
And that very innocent remark from my father, in this sense, is really what you're remarking on, which is that people really want to know how you do that. And
Well, it's also-
we are the experts on that. That's what we spend our life doing.
The playing of the music, the game of music, you know, that's important. That's what I really want to find out about, and not being stick to little dots on a piece of paper. And play with each other.
Let me interject as well, because as our world is changing and so many of the countries that used to be controlled by their governments become open to new ideas, jazz and improvisation, if you keep them together or separate, either way it offers them a way of expressing themselves in a way that they could not have done before. And before that they were doing it in kind of behind the scenes, and now it's an open way, and it's a release and an effective of a way to let them be themselves without having to have controls. And everybody's excited about the opportunity of being free to do things.
What do you think, Mike, of the level? I mean, are you as impressed? I mean, we have been to these meetings for these 16 years, Wouter and myself. I mean, what do you think of the level of musicianship and maturity that we saw this week, that you're going to see on this DVD and this tape?
Right. Well, as someone who's been involved with the Abersal's Summer Jazz Workshops for about 30 years, I can tell you that we've seen tens of thousands of students over the years, and there's never been one of those combinations, even when we had the advanced camp of Jamie's, where we had a collection of 40 to 50 or 60 students, and these aren't students, these are young professionals, that play at this high level. I mean, last night's concert was amazing, and I'm sitting there going, I want to be up there playing with them. I mean, I want to be part of that, and I don't think there's been any one time that I've experienced a group of students that came together that had as much cooperativeness between themselves and the skill to make it come off. None of the groups had anybody that knew each other, and in less than 3 or 4 days rehearsal, they're making music that is just astounding. So I think it's been a very exciting experience.
It is a gamble because they do not know each other, and musically or socially, in some cases, even language is a problem. I mean, English is the currency, but you know, there can be a problem if it's not learned in schools and so forth, depending on the country. And I must say, I mean, it's my responsibility to put together these 7 ensembles of 6 to 8 members each, so we're looking at 50 students more or less. And you know, I'm always kind of throwing the dice, because really what I do is basically look at the map in my head and try to just geographically mix it up so that they're going to get the most exposure to the most countries. And I am always amazed that 90%, 95% of the time it works out. Not just that it works out, but the results like last night was spectacular, and I expect tonight also. So,
Well, I think the other thing on top of that, when we started putting this together, we had to trust our colleagues, people that I didn't know anywhere in the world. Most of these people I did not have any experience with, to say, send us these individuals. We need people, key individuals in these spots. And the good thing about the education movement is now that we can call on people in Australia or Argentina or Finland, and they have a drummer or a bass player that not only can play, but really play. And the language has no, music is the language. You know, that's how they speak to each other, and that was the exciting thing for me, knowing that it didn't matter where we went, it was okay.
Oh, that's great. Well, anything to add? We're good?
Well, I'm hoping, well, I'm not even hoping, I know that there will be, it feels like that okay, there's an organization behind this meeting, but I think what the IASJ have done is create an example with these meetings, how you can do things. Of course we are there and we'll do our things, so we'll keep doing it, but I think it has become a thing in itself, even without the IASJ. This has become a major force in jazz, and I think that was the task, and I think our mission is on a good way.
Amen.
And let me add to that too.
That's
I think
great.
as an educator in an American school, we speak of diversity. And in our language, often that means a few things. But in the language of this organization, diversity encompasses much more than race, much more than language, and it encompasses the ability to communicate from people from all over the world that would never have touched each other, ever. And to have something of that happen and be a part of it is a wonderful experience, I think, not just for the three of us, but for everybody that participated.
Well, you're completely right. In the International Music Council and European Music Council, the buzzword is cultural diversity. Yeah, how many times I've read it and seen it the last few days. It's incredible. And that they try to, and you see the struggle there to all the races and people. But here it's such a natural thing. I don't even realize that I'm so culturally diverse. It's just there. It just happens.
Well, it happened last night. It happened 3 times in a row, and it happened again tonight. 4 groups, and it's an exciting adventure.
Well, those of you watching the tape, our finished product are really, hopefully, as impressed as we are with the musicians from all these countries and the workshops we did and the teaching and so forth. And we are available on the web, of course, under IASJ and our history and so forth. Any support or anything, any interest that you have, we're certainly welcome. And again, I just want to thank Mike for really taking such great care of us this week. We even had a chance to go out on the Ohio River on a beautiful night on a boat and had a jam session on the boat. I mean, what more can you say? That was under the moonlight, what could you say? With fireworks at the right proper moment, taking place on starboard side or whatever you say.
Lightning.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Wouter.